Welcome to Caffeinate Your Career. Today's topic, interview preparation. I'm your host, the career coach with the most, Jason Hopper. With me today is my co-host and the super cool Senior Director of Career Financial Services, Miss Allison Harding.
Hi, everybody. So we have a question for you. When you were a kid, when you were young, did you leave your room neat or messy? The reason we're asking that, I know it's really off course, but think about your life today. And how does it monitor or mirror what you did as a kid, or have you completely changed?
Allison and I were just having this conversation because I have a 12-year-old son, and he doesn't clean his room a lot. So, yeah. All right. Looks like we are, in fact, live. We got 12 people popping in right now. If you are watching live, tell us where you're from. I will monitor the chat. Interview preparation. Allison, what's interesting... What is interesting is we've talked about preparing for the interview before, just kind of like here and there, but we haven't done a whole episode of the show devoted specifically for preparing for the interview.
Right.
And so that's one of the reasons why we are doing that today. So let's start out with the first bit, which is research.
I've told this story before. I had an old boss in my last company who wasn't my favorite person, but it has nothing to do with the story. But I had this guy I'd interviewed, and I thought he was pretty good, And so my boss was coming into town, and we sat down, and the first thing he said is, "What do you think of our website?" And the guy said, "I've never looked at your website." And Jay got up, shook his hand, and walked into the door. And he said, "What happened?" And I said, "You don't know who we are. How can you want to work for us when you don't even know who we are?" So that research that Jason is bringing up is really important.
Yeah, you need to know not only what the company does, but if it is a product-based company, what type of product do they have and how does it work? I think it's also important to look up the interviewer on LinkedIn and see what their background is, and if you may have something in common with them in the background. Definitely stick with LinkedIn though, and you can look them up on Facebook. And that look you're giving me is like, but you can.
It is the professional profile that you want to know about.
But when you are letting the interviewer know that you've done your research on them, you can't look them up on Facebook and be like, "Hey, your daughter had her quinceañera. How did that go?" That's going to get you escorted out of the building by security.
It's like you're really like a stalker. But back to the research, focusing on the company a little bit, knowing their mission statement, knowing their values, knowing if your values and what you want for your future and a career aligns with them, and if there's places for you to go and growth. It's important for you to know and understand all those things. Looking at the person with whom you're going to be speaking to is really important also. But knowing all that background about the company, I think, really helps a lot.
I 100% agree. In fact, so when I went to go and interview here, I take notes on my phone with the Notes app. I have notes for everything. I am in that app constantly. And so I had my notes for JFS, and I had this much typed out in my phone, seriously, about 3 inches. I knew everything there was to know about this company. The name of our building is the Edna Zale building. You know what? I looked up who Edna Zale was. I'm like, Edna Zale, who's that? I did a real deep dive. There were not going to be any questions where you ask me something like, I don't know. I knew as much as I could about this company, and I did my research and practiced all my answers so that when you asked me, "So what do you know about JFS?" I was ready to go.
So the other thing in an interview, and I always like this question a lot, you have to look up. You don't have to, but it's a good idea to know or understand who the competition is with that company.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite questions in an interview when somebody asked me, before I came to nonprofit was, who are your biggest competitors and why are you better?
That's a great question.
It is a great question. And if you ask that, and they can then look at you and say, oh my gosh, not only do you understand who we are, you're really asking deep questions. They're not shallow like a lot of people sometimes look at.
Allison, I keep looking at the phone. There are 34 people watching live right now. Guys, if you have questions, I am looking at the chat, so go ahead and ask questions. Do your research. Also, too, I think it's very important that you, when you let the interviewer know that you've done your research, to preface it without just jumping into it. Right. So, like, and you do you, but something like, hey, just let you know, in preparing for this interview, I did look you up on LinkedIn, and I see that you have a background in staffing. I have a background in staffing. Like, why, Allison, did you go from staffing moving into a nonprofit organization?
Legitimate question, and a good one, too. And some of these questions you ask might come at the very end when the interviewer says to you, what questions do you have for me? A perfect segue into that was, looking you up or looking the company up. These were just a couple questions or things that I found of interest. Could we delve into that a little bit? Gosh, to me, that would be a great, segue into learning more about you. And remember, you get hired because
you are liked.
I like you.
That's right. I think the next bit is also important, which is to understand the role.
Oh, no question.
Right. You need, guys, here's something that you need to do, and I know a lot of y'all out there aren't doing it. You're just you're kind of pencil whipping it. You're skimming the job post. Read your job post carefully, and then read it again. Make sure that you understand what it is that the company is hiring for.
Yeah, the job post is going to have anywhere from 6 to 10 bullet points. The top, whatever it is, 3, 4, or 5, are the must-haves. You must have those skills, or something that is similar to those skills. The bottoms are the I wants. Those are really beneficial too, but those you build into your stories that you talk about. The must-haves is your story, and the I wants you build into that story to show the people exactly why you fit that job. The company has a problem, you're the solution, fit in there.
That's right. That's a great point, Allison, because the purpose of the interview is not to get the job. That's not why you're there. You're there in that seat to see if you can solve their problem. And if you have not read the job description carefully and understand what the problem is that you are there to solve, you're not helping yourself going into the interview.
So if you can tell right now, we're talking about things that feed into each other. By researching the company, if you want to work there, if it's a product or an industry that you want to be in, how you would fit in. And now you're talking about the role, the problem they have. And it's a problem because the work that person was doing, because the role is vacant, is being spread out to other people who are saying, I'm overworked, or something might not get done. I have a cough drop in my mouth, everybody, so I want to apologize. What is going? It keeps moving in my mouth. I've had a really bad cold, and so I just chewed up.
Okay.
But leading into that is really important.
Oh, this is the moment where the show just goes sideways. Okay.
It's gone.
Okay.
So if you like the role, you like the company, you can really embrace with your interviewer what you need to be doing and how you can be doing it.
Good morning, Sharon Harris. You never know what's going to happen when we go live. Oh, boy. Okay.
And it's okay to laugh and have fun at an interview.
Oh, yeah. Well, so the process for interviewing in itself is just kind of awkward because you show up and you meet a stranger and there's a topic for the conversation. We're here to talk about this job, this role. So, but like, I think that you're right. And people forget to be themselves in the middle of the interview. And you could talk a good game, but like ultimately we said, people are going to hire people they like, right? Like I remember the exact moment that we clicked in the interview. Do you remember what that moment was?
I do not.
Okay, I'm going to tell you. So we're going through, and this is just coming up. Just the general kind of questions, right? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And I said, I'm not really good at math.
Oh, yeah.
And you said, I'm not really good at math either. And I thought things were going fairly well. So I said, jokingly, the two of us aren't doing very well today, are we? And that was, and you laughed, and that was the moment we clicked in the interview. And I'm like, and I was like nothing past that. I'm like, this is going well, right? And obviously you made a good decision in hiring me.
And I'm still not good at math, and neither is he.
I'm not, but I don't, and that was, I explained the rest of that. I don't have to be good at math. I have a calculator to do this job. I have a calculator on the phone. I can ask Siri what percentage of what is. It's not a required skill to do this job. Right. And I built that part into. Guys, it's important. Good morning, Allison Bishop. Y'all are starting to, and Melissa Hargis, I see you. Melissa has a question. She said, you accepted the interview, then on the research side, it really isn't a good fit. Do you cancel or just use it as practice?
You know, that is a terrific question. I'm glad you asked it. I would never cancel an interview personally because maybe that job isn't a good fit at that company, but maybe they have something else is. If you don't like the company, use it as practice. Know what you do right, know what you do wrong, know what you can improve. And then you can go back and research and understand yourself better and be able to do better on the next interview. But you never know where it might lead to something else.
Yeah, it's a great question, Melissa. I agree. Never cancel the interview. They may have something else. It could be that a different department would be better. This happened with Jill.
Right.
Our community liaison, Jill Tokamoto, interviewed, or rather turned in her resume to Robin in the food pantry for a food pantry position. Robin was like,
no,
nah, you're going to fit better with CFS. Gave it to Allison and
interviewed
and hired Jill. Different department. It happens. There's a perfect example of that happening just last year. It happens all the time, guys. So don't ever not show up for the interview just because you never know what other opportunities they may have. That's the other bit, because all of the positions that you see online and on job boards, that's not all that the company's hiring for.
It's not.
There are several other things that they have that you don't know about.
And also, now if it's the company that doesn't align with your mission and your values, it's a practice interview. The half hour you're going to take is good, but do your best interview. It's always nice to be able to turn a company down if they offer you something and you don't want to be there.
It's true. Good morning, Vitaly. Good morning, Monica. I see both of you guys out there. Know your resume. That's kind of an important one. I was like, there's an episode of Seinfeld where George and Jerry are talking, and George is like, all right, I gotta go read this book on risk management. And Jerry says, risk management? Why risk management? George says, apparently it's on my resume. Like, whatever is on your resume, you need to be prepared to speak to, because it's on there. The employer could ask for it.
Right. And what's getting even more important, especially since the pandemic, when a lot of people had that gap of not working, and that gap grew after the pandemic, and people didn't go back to work for whatever reason, or couldn't find the job that they wanted, those gaps and being able to explain them are really, really important. Now, people are more accepting of those gaps today,
yes,
but you have to explain that you weren't sitting in front of the TV watching soap operas and eating bonbons. What did you do to help yourself grow during this period of time? And if you can't explain that, it might be a turnoff to an interviewer. So talk about if you volunteered, talk about if you took classes, even if it's a cooking class, you were doing something. Talk about the research you did on whatever it was, or changing careers, or doing whatever it is. But those gaps and being able to fill that with good information is really important.
Phil Kanicki popped into the chat and said for Melissa that you might not be a fit for the role, but you might be able to recommend somebody else for the role.
Good idea.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Phil.
Appreciate that. Yeah. So know what's on your resume. It's so important to be able to tell your story. I think that the people that have the best stories are the ones that they may not always get the job, but they're at least memorable. And that's really where you want to be, right? Is remembered by the interviewer.
So that resume that you wrote, okay, when you go into the interview, do not reiterate everything that's on your resume. I have it in front of me. That's why we called you in the first place. So don't vomit back the same information that's on here. What you have to do is to create your stories.
Yeah. Well, this is just a marketing tool to get the interview. Once you're in the interview, and this is actually one of the next points, which is you need to be prepared to answer typical interview questions, right? Like, tell me a little bit about yourself. You have to be able to know how to explain your story to the interviewer. I always would, as a recruiter, I always phrased it different. I would always say, so I've got your resume in front of me, but tell me your career story.
So that is a better way of phrasing that, because too many people, when you say, tell me about yourself, go back to where you're born, how you grew up, where you went to college, how you got, I don't care. I want to know your career story. So the way Jason asked it is really much better. But if they say, tell me about yourself, don't go back to 40, 30, 20 years ago. I want to know what you've been doing in the last 10 or 15 years, or how you got into this industry and then how you've built yourself up. And make it a story. Well, in 2001, I did this. Don't do that. Tell me your story. Yeah, I was working at Southwest Airlines, and one of our vendors started talking to me, and I got really interested in food distribution. And when that happened, we talked more and more, and I thought, you know what, this might be something I want to get into. And so I changed careers. That's the basis for your story and where you are today.
So there is a formula for this. It is what your past is,
mm-hmm.
what you learned from it, and why you're excited about this role that you're interviewing for. That's the formula for tell me a little bit about yourself.
So your story is always important. It should never be more, some people are going to say, what? 90 seconds. Okay? More than 90 seconds, the interviewer is making their grocery list. It's got to be short. And the reason you do that is you want to build a rapport with that person. And if you talk too much, it's not giving them time to be able to respond with questions. So if you make it short and interesting, they're going to respond with some questions. Well, wow, how did you go from working in accounting at Southwest Airlines to working for whomever it was? That's really interesting. I was all, and now we're getting into some personal things. I always enjoyed food. I always enjoyed making new recipes. I thought would be something that would be, something I would enjoy doing.
Other kind of general questions like, what are your strengths? What skills need improving? Why did you leave your last employer? Or why are you currently seeking a new position? And so these are all things that you, the job seeker, you guys need to know how to answer those questions.
Mm-hmm.
There are just go Google typical interview questions. You'll get a whole list, or ask ChatGPT to list it out for you, and then go practice answering those questions.
So one of the question, what are your weaknesses? Be sure you never use a weakness that would interfere with your job performance.
Right.
Like
math.
Yeah.
Right. Allison and I can't math, but we don't need to know how to math to be excellent career coaches.
We both have calculators at our desk and computers and all that stuff. But if I was going into a role where that's important, it's not a good idea to say, my weakness is not being able to calculate well. Maybe not a good job for someone who's in a buying position, or is someone in inventory or something like that. So you have to use things that don't interfere with your job performance, one, and two, you have to tell how you're improving that. So as an example, I am not organized, period. I know where everything is. I don't miss dates, but sometimes I'm not timely on the information that's needed. I wasn't. And I knew this was a weakness in myself. So I took one of the Covey courses, and then I carry a notebook and a calendar always. Paper calendar, even though I have it on my phone. And I don't just put, such and such a report is due on Friday the 14th. On Monday the 10th, 9th, I put down must work on report, be finished by 9 o'clock Thursday, have it in by 8 o'clock Friday morning. So I have had to work to organize myself much better. On my first review here, it was like, are you ever going to get anything in on time? And I'm like, I don't think so. So after that, I realized that it's really important to do the right thing.
I still can't math. No, here's the other part and that's a great explanation, because what happened is you now say, okay, I'm not organized, but here are the steps I took to fix the problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other part of that. It's like, whatever the skill that needs improving, tell me how you're planning on or what you're doing to improve it.
And so the other thing, some of the reports that we have to turn in, I have to depend on the entire department getting information to me. So approximately, probably 2 weeks in advance, I'll say, what are your what are your achievements? And now we have another report we have to turn in. But now I know not only does it depend on me, it depends on other people. And if I'm not organized and can't ask them those questions and get that information, I'm going to be late again. And I don't want to do that.
I think it's also important in preparing is to make sure that you are ready to answer behavioral-based interview questions.
True.
Allison, what's an example of a behavioral-based interview question?
Tell me about a time when.
Tell me about a time when.
Give me an example of.
Yes. Those are all story-based. They're STAR stories, guys. STAR, if you don't know, is an acronym that stands for situation, task, action, and result. Companies are still using behavioral-based interview questions. I just spoke to a client yesterday. She said every single question they asked was a behavioral-based interview question. It is very important that you have not only your STAR stories ready, but that you have them practiced. And if you need help creating your STAR stories, you can give us a call here at 972-437-9950, extension 379. Leave a message, and somebody from the team will get back to you in 24 hours to start that process.
Great segue into those stories. Those stories are meant to help the company understand how you process. And vacancies cost companies a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, there's disruption in the service of whatever the organization is, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a product, whether it's a service, it doesn't matter. And so the important thing for you to be able to do is make sure your story fits the question that's being asked. So you may have 6 or 7 stories. You're not going to tell them all, but you're going to look at know your stories and be able to put it in the right place so that that person who's interviewing you knows you better, the way you process, the way you think, the way you move forward with clients or customers or whomever it is.
The other thing that's also great about STAR stories is they're just unique to you.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else has that story.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, the people that do the best in interviews are the best storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
They're just able to tell good stories. So, if you have a good story, again, it's the thing that makes you memorable to the employer. And that's what counts the most, is being remembered. Monica had a question. She said, the chat's kind of moving fast. I know you've talked about this before, but can you mention how to discuss your time off when you're managing family matters?
So years and years ago, someone would say, "Oh, I was taking care of my mom or my dad, my brother, sister, whatever," and we'd look at them and say, "Yeah, sure, uh-huh." Today, it's very, very acceptable because people are living longer. It's a fact.
Yeah.
And there's Alzheimer's, or there's dementia, or there's just an illness, any illness, many, many illnesses, where there is no place for them to go at a certain time in their life. And family members have to take care of it. So be honest. But during that time of taking care of those people, again, you can still improve yourself by taking classes and courses online. You don't have to leave the house to do it anymore.
Yeah.
COVID is a terrible thing. It was a terrible, the pandemic is awful, but it also changed the way we do things, which is good. With Zoom or Teams or however organizations are doing it, you can improve your skills and yourself and still be able to stay home and take care of that person. So when I come in and say, "Jason, I see you've been taking care of your family for the last 2 years. What's going on?"
Oh, yeah. So I was. Oh, yes, Allison.
You can tell we don't practice.
We do. It's just not we don't practice together. So so how you answer is my mom got really sick, and I've been taking care of her, but I've also been upskilling, and I've gotten my certification in project management, which I'm hoping to use going forward in my next role.
So it can be short and sweet.
Yeah.
But it is more acceptable today. So if that's occurring, don't panic.
Yeah. So we had another question. John Singleton asked, what star stories can overlap with each other to cover multiple questions? Like a question about dealing with difficult people to answer can also be used, and how you persuade or motivate somebody because there's too many behavioral-based interview questions to ask. Yes. So there's typically categories that your star stories are going to fall into. One is going to be customer service. One is going to be time management. One is going to be teamwork. One is adaptability, and the other is change. When I work with clients with behavioral-based interview questions and star stories, I have a link of just typical behavioral-based interview questions. It has about 32 questions on it, and they all fall into those different categories. So yes, John, you'll need one story for each one of those categories, but the questions themselves are kind of very similar in how they're asked.
They really are. And don't repeat the same story. That's, again, why you should have 6 or 7 stories to be able to discuss. And again, they're going to be similar. So don't worry about overlapping concepts, because that's a good thing.
You need to make sure that you're asking questions in the interview. And I don't mean questions that you can get answers to from the website. Don't do that. Like, I've been really big lately on culture questions. And that does not mean ask the interviewer, "So, tell me about your culture."
Worst question on earth.
No. But you could ask, what was the last thing your team celebrated?
Or how does the company celebrate achievements? What does the company do to embrace the whole organization? Are they able to do that? If it's a huge organization, no. But, you have to know who you're talking to, those types of things.
If it's a role where you are on site and in person, you could always ask, what does the team do for lunch every day? Right? It's the way that the employer answers the question that will tell you what it is and how their culture runs. So, for example, if you ask what they do for lunch every day, and they say, "Oh, you know what? We're kind of busy, so we just sit and eat at our desks."
At least you know. It's not a bad thing. You know.
Yes.
And do you like that or not like that?
Right. I don't like that.
No. So what do you do for lunch every day?
We eat lunch in the break room every day.
As a team.
Our team eats together every day. Unless there's something weird going on. So, pardon me. Okay, so another question is, back to the question about weakness. Is it better to answer with a common but immaterial shortcoming, or a story about migrating or overcoming a flaw? Thanks, James. That's a great question. And John Singleton said, excellent, please repeat the categories one more time. So the categories for your behavioral-based interview.
And you can look up behavioral-based questions and good behavioral-based answers online, and there's a gazillion of them, just so that y'all know.
So the categories, once again, are teamwork, customer service, adaptability, I forgot the other. Change is one of them, right? Time management, that's the other one. Time management. And then the other question. So you can, James. Yes, James McIntosh. Your question for weaknesses: is it better to list a common flaw or something very specific?
You know, it's really got to be something about you that you're really trying to improve.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to just throw stuff out there, it's not going to add value to the interview. So, no, you have time now to research yourself and figure out what you want to improve in your life. It doesn't have to be a big flaw. It doesn't have to be, oh my gosh, this is ginormous. It can be something that you're just working. It could be some time management issues you have, or it could be a skill you're improving. For example, we had someone here who was not good in front of large groups of people. Just didn't like it, was uncomfortable. But yet we have to give presentations to different types of groups. They went to Toastmasters on their own, and in the evening got better and better and better, and came back and said, I'm ready, here's what I did. When she interviewed at her next position, that was one of her strengths. So what started as a weakness turned into a strength, but she had the motivation to do that.
Yeah, I think that's right. The answer has to be the true answer, and we can turn the weakness into something that's
really beneficial to you. Yeah.
I still can't math. Sharon Harris says, "What about taking religious days off? When is the best time to ask for this?"
Most companies today have PTO, so you can take any day off you want. It's considered part of your PTO time, whether it's a federal holiday that the company doesn't take or a religious holiday. Since it's PTO, you usually don't have to give a reason why.
Yeah, there you go. Dress professionally. Make sure that you are, and I think like since the pandemic, like suit and tie culture is pretty much dead, unless you're a doctor, a lawyer.
Well, what you do is ask HR, whomever called you for the interview, ask them how to dress. Just, if they say casual and you show up in a suit, not good. So years ago, when I first moved to Texas, I worked at Southwest Airlines in HR. And they would tell the candidates, we dress casually. And the candidate should say, what does that mean? Oh, right. Some do, some don't. If you came in a suit, either a woman in a suit or a man in a suit, you were immediately marked not hire, because it means you don't listen. So listen for those little cues when the interview is being set up, and if you're unsure, ask questions.
Yeah.
But still, casual doesn't mean, flip-flops and a t-shirt. Casual still means like, khakis or a short skirt and a blouse or, something like that.
Well, right. If they tell you, hey, we wear jeans here, show up in jeans, show up in jeans. That's what they told you to do. Yeah, it's just following direction. I think it's also important that you mind your hygiene. Make sure that your nails are trimmed. Make sure that your hair is combed. Make sure that your teeth are brushed.
And your clothes are clean.
And that your clothes are clean and neat, right? Did you know? I think I don't know if I told the story or not. I interviewed with you on a Tuesday, and I came back 2 days later on a Thursday to interview with our CEO, Kathy Barker.
I know this story.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be talking to the CEO. And so like I was, me and you were good, but I'm going into this interview, and I'm getting ready for the interview, and I'm now, I want to make sure that I'm there and I'm on time. I'm driving to the interview, and I find the location because we had a different office too. We had an offsite location, and that's where Kathy was going to be. I found the thing, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, oh crap, I did not brush my teeth. And in getting prepared for all of the things, I forgot to brush my teeth. And so
this story I didn't know.
So what I did is I drove, I was still in the car. I got in the parking lot, drove to the QT, got some gum, some of that icebreaker gum, right? And just shoved gum in my mouth. So it chewed it up, and I spit it out right before I walked in, so I would have minty fresh breath. Don't forget to brush your teeth.
First thing in the morning.
I do that after I get out of the shower. Since I got out of the shower and I'm drying off, and I'm putting my clothes on, and in my head I'm practicing answering questions, and I just missed that step. That's the next bit, guys. As you're going to interview, make sure that you practice. Those candidates that falter are the ones that just show up and try to wing it. If you do not practice your stories, if you do not practice your answers, you are not going to do well in the interview. It's the whole reason we created a practice interview program, which is today.
So we have a mock interview program every other Tuesday. This week, not next week, the following week. From they're 30-minute sessions. So you have a 15-minute interview, and then the person with whom you're interviewing, your mock interviewer, will then have a conversation with you about how the interview went, the goods, the bads, the improvements, and then they send information to Jason.
Yeah. So the interviews they're all virtual. So everybody out there can prepare. We will be doing them in person. I haven't figured out the logistics yet, but I think I got part of that. So 30-minute interviews, 15 minutes for feedback, and then the interviewer will send me a form that I will email to the participants, so you guys will have something tangible to look at and work on practicing.
And sometimes you have to do it more than once.
Yeah.
So don't hesitate if you work with one of our people to then turn around 2 weeks later and say, I need to do this again. I need to improve on this, this, and this.
I have a team of 5 volunteers. They all have extensive experience in hiring and interviewing.
They're all professionals.
I've actually I turned 2 people away. They just did not fit the program. And they are all excellent. If you're interested in doing the next practice interviews, which will be on March 12th at 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock Central Time, send me an email, put practice interview into the subject line and what you want, what time slot you want, and I will make sure to get you registered. By the way,
what's your email?
My email is the letter J, Hopper, HOPPER @jfsdallas.org. And so today's full up. Next time on the 12th, I already got 2 people signed up. It's going fast, guys. So if you're interested, get on the list now. Okay, so you've got to practice. I suggest one of the things you do is set up a Zoom just for yourself, right? And again, we just said, get a list of behavioral-based interview questions, get a list of general interview questions, and then record yourself on the Zoom, and then practice answering those questions. The reason I ask that you record yourself is you go back and look at it later. Note your body language. Are you sitting up straight? Are your arms crossed? Are you slouched down? Like, how are you? You should be sitting up straight, right? You should be sitting up straight. But and be somewhat relaxed. Also, too, are you just too stiff? Just be yourself. And
it's hard.
It is hard.
All this stuff we're talking about it because it's not easy in an interview. And so these chairs that we sit in here are terrible because they lean back.
They
keep wanting to do that. So Jason and I both keep having to straighten ourselves up, and then we do this again, and then we straighten up. you don't know where you're going to be sitting. You don't know if it's going to be an office or a conference room or in a cubicle. You're just not sure. So be prepared for everything. And don't be afraid to readjust yourself. Don't be afraid to take some notes with you because you're not going to remember everything. So let's say you've got 5 or 6 star stories. You're not going to write the stories out, but you're going to put maybe the topic next to it so that when they say, tell me about a time when you had difficulty with a peer on your team. You can look at one of your star stories and say, that's really interesting. Da, da, da.
Yeah, see, that's the next bit is make sure, what do you bring?
Right.
What are you going to bring to this interview? Like, so get a portfolio, right? You guys understand what I'm talking about. So that black kind of thing that zips, and you can pick them up at Office Max for $25. Sometimes companies will give them to you if you've worked at a previous company. Make sure there's a pen in there. Make sure there's a notepad in there. Even if you take notes on your phone, make sure you have something to write with and on.
So I suggest you not take notes on your phone.
No, I would not in the interview.
Right.
But like,
have your notes on your
and that's the other part. When you're taking a note, it's okay to write notes, but you can't be like this. You can't just be looking down. No, that's not going to work.
You also have to ask permission because sometimes if a company has certain agreements with their customers, you can't take notes and they'll tell you.
Yeah.
So ask,
yeah.
Can I take notes during this interview? Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. Make sure you've got copies of your certifications in case they want to see that. Some places want references, staffing. When we go do the process, we are going to complete your I-9 and your W.
Yeah, but you're not going to do it here, so don't worry about that stuff. Here in the interview.
Afterwards, yeah.
Anyways, for staffing. This is for staffing agencies, but also include 2 or 3 copies of your resume because maybe the person who's interviewing has a couple other people and forgot to make copies. Have those. Just be prepared.
Yes. I ran out once.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was a corporate interview, and I interviewed with the recruiter, then I interviewed with the lead, then I interviewed with the manager, and then the regional manager, and then they're like, hey, the CFO makes all the decisions, you can talk to him. I got into the interview with the CFO, and he's like, do you have a copy of your resume? And I'm like, I was out. I ran out. I'm like, Dave's got it. Like, I didn't know what to say. Like, and it was the most awkward interview afterwards because he didn't have anything. He had no reference. The person just dropped me off and walked out with the copy of the resume, and I'd already given out all my resumes. So, like, I, from then on, had 8 to 10 copies just in case, because that did happen to me. Make sure you're on time.
Oh.
Make sure you're on time. I would, if possible, if you're going out to the interview, make sure you plan your route ahead of time. Make sure that you are at least 30 minutes early. Do not walk into the building until 10 minutes early. Yeah. But make sure you are early.
In Texas, to be 30 minutes early is really miserable. So
it could be
10 or 15 minutes early, and then walk into the building. To me, is plenty of time. But Jason gets lost going to the building.
I do. So, that's why I say make sure that you are early.
Yeah, he didn't do that because he could travel the route and then get lost. So he just doesn't like to drive. So. You know who you are, but walking into the building 5 to 10 minutes early is exactly acceptable. Any earlier than that, it's like,
I am
too much.
I am directionally challenged, and I still can't math. I once went to an interview, and I didn't know. I knew where they were in the building. I knew what the building was. I didn't know where they were. So I walk in, and it's like right there. I'm like, oh, okay. So I don't want to sit right in front of the place because I'm early. They're not open yet. So I go around the corner and I sit down and now I'm practicing, and I've got my resume and I'm practicing in my head. People are walking in and they see me sitting and they, and I'm like look up and they make eye contact and they smile and they kind of keep walking. And so now it's like 10 minutes till time and I go to interview and guess who's in the office? Every single person that walked by me just then. And I'm like, it's a little awkward.
Those things will happen, but that's why time it right.
Time it right. Follow up.
So in your practice, by the way, not all interviews today are in person. So that Zoom interview and the way you look and the way you do things is important. Some interviews are in person. So don't hesitate to also look in a mirror and talk to yourself to see how you make expressions and how you talk and how other people are going to perceive you. Because now you're looking at yourself and you're being a little critical, which is a good thing. Don't be overly critical. If you have someone that you are close to that would sit with you for an hour and do a couple practice questions or interviews, that's always beneficial too. Someone who's not too critical, but can be honest with you.
Yeah, that's important for sure. I think also too, it's important to follow up. Make sure that you are emailing your interviewer before close of business that day, or interviewers. That is also too, like if you solve like 3 people, every single person gets an interview. Or gets an email. I'm sorry. Everybody that was in the interview gets an email. And by the way, and I just had this conversation with a client. They're like, "Well, I didn't have the other people's email." I was like, "Do you have one person's email?" "Yeah, I've got." "Do you have everybody's email?" "I just told you what my email was. It's jhopper@jfsdallas.org."
What's mine?
You know what it is. It's aharding at the end part after the at doesn't change. And if you know how the first part goes, like J Hopper or A Harding, now you have everybody in my organization's email. Please don't email everybody in my org.
But also, people often ask, should I send snail mail or an email?
Yes.
Either way is perfect. Sending both is great.
Yes.
But either one is perfect.
I think email before close of business that day and drop a thank you note into the mail like that day. It'll get there 2 days later. Mm-hmm. It's a nice reminder. I learned staffing most of my career. I very rarely would get thank you notes. When I did, I was like super happy.
So if it's a very, very large company, the snail mail is going to take longer because it goes into a mail office and then it's distributed and then put in. So that could be like a week's delay. So an email really is a good idea. Whether you liked the company or not, send an email, send a thank you, because you never know where that could lead, that could help you at another company. That person you may have liked, but the job wasn't right. That person could move on. They'll remember you. Do the right stuff.
Monica Bentel asked, how do you bring up time off when it's something that you've had planned far in advance, but now lands on weekdays after being hired? Good question.
I'm not sure what the question is.
She's asking you're going to hire me or you're going to extend an offer to me, but I've got a cruise that I've already paid for.
Oh, if it's a vacation, when you're given the offer, you let them know then.
Yeah.
In fact, Jill, when we hired her, had a cruise 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
For 10 days. And she told me when we gave her the offer, that's fine. We also told her that because she had not accrued enough vacation time, she would not be paid for it. She was fine with that also. So, those are the things that you can work out when you're given the offer. It's not something that you would talk about in an interview. If you're taking a class, and maybe that class is every Thursday at 3:00, you might do that in the interview also, or not in the interview, when you're given an offer and say, listen, I'm taking this class. I've got 4 more weeks. It's 3:00 every Thursday. How can we handle this? And, make arrangements. Most people are very flexible.
It's just making sure you're communicating well. And Yolanda Chen asked if the interviewer is writing and taking notes on their phone to what you were saying, why is it wrong for you to do the same?
Because you're looking down too much. Period.
Yeah, y'all see me like this. It's like I'm looking to see what y'all are saying most of the time. And then I hold up the phone like, what?
Yeah, that's why. Because as an interviewer, I want to see your expressions and the way you talk and the way you listen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good questions today.
Yeah, very good questions. Allison, we are at time. That went very fast, as I knew it would.
Again, if you want to meet with us, we do a lot of things on Zoom. So if you're not in the area, that's okay. The phone number is 972-437-9950, extension 379. Leave a message. We do get back to you. Promise.
Yes, we will. So, fun question for today. Or do you have a question?
I don't.
You don't have a question? I don't either. I didn't think of, I planned out, like, everything's done. And then, like, in the middle of this, I was like, I didn't think of a fun question. If y'all have any fun questions out there, let us know. And also, too, still can't math. All right, so this has been Caffeinate Your Career for this week. Next week, you know what we were talking about? No, you interviewed and you got the job. Congratulations. Next week, tips for your first day at work.
And that's really important.
Yep. We'll see you then. Have a
Bye,
great week.
everybody. Thank you.